So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's 5:02, and I'm excited to introduce our amazing dietitian, Catherine Hu. She's going to be presenting on food psychology, understanding eating behaviors. Catherine Hu is a registered dietitian and certified diabetes care and education specialist. She works in the Stanford Endocrinology Clinic and diabetes care program, where she sees patients one-on-one and also teaches group classes. We welcome questions along the way, but we will make sure we'll do the Q&A at the very end of the presentation. Catherine, if you'd like to get started, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for the introduction. So definitely very excited to talk about the topic today. Okay, so wanted to start off by asking a couple questions just to get you all thinking about your own eating habits and how you view foods. So think about, how do you currently view your relationship with food? What do you think about food? Is it pretty neutral? Do you feel that you're at war with food sometimes, that you don't trust yourself around certain types of food? Do you eat differently when you are by yourself versus with others, and why? And are there any eating habits you wish to change? And in general, this presentation is going to delve into some of the different factors that affect our eating behaviors, whether they're conscious or subconscious, and whether that has developed into particular eating habits. And then we'll explore different techniques to help you understand your thoughts and feelings around food and help make peace with food. So here's an example of what eating behavior means. So eating behavior is a complex interplay of physiological, psychological, social, and genetic factors that influence meal timing, quantity of food intake, food preference, and food selection. So just some examples of eating behaviors could be if you notice that you eat quickly, maybe you perceive certain foods as rewards for things or punishments. Another behavior could be watching TV associated with snacking, even if you're not hungry. And oftentimes I have a lot of clients that approach me with wanting to make a change around a particular eating habit. That could be one of these or something else, but it's not serving them or maybe causing feelings of out of control or guilt. And in order to address them, first we need to know that it's important to understand the root of the behavior. So starting with the biological factors, so we'll talk about genetics. So genetics can predispose different individuals to certain food preferences and behaviors. So this could be a propensity to like more sweet versus salty foods. They've also found specific genes and taste receptors, such as the gene controlling the sensitivity to bitter taste, that can affect how you choose food and what foods you like. Cilantro is another pretty famous one where certain genes, how it's expressed, can result in liking cilantro taste or having it taste like soap. You can also think about genes are involved in expressing hormones that impact hunger and satiety signals. So we know that there are hunger hormones. So when we're hungry, it's because we release ghrelin, and when we release leptin and CCK hormones when we're satiated. So they help us feel satisfied. Interestingly, the way that we eat and approach food can change the amount of hormone levels in our body. So there has been some research finding that severe calorie restriction tends to result in increased ghrelin or hunger hormones while decreasing leptin levels, or the satiety hormone, right after the diet and also up to 1 year after. So it's very interesting because how we eat can contribute to changes in our own appetite and metabolic regulation. Next is psychological factors. So things such as stress or other emotions can certainly influence our food choices and consumption. So we know that for stress, maybe think about the last time you were stressed, and if you tend to reach for a certain food, maybe it's comforting, maybe it's something else, but we want something that helps calm the stress. And it's because stress affects the reward system in our brain. And there has been studies done that find that stress actually increases our preference for high sugar and high fat foods, things that are very satiating and satisfying. Also, the way that we approach dieting can also influence how we eat. So there have been some common behaviors that have been studied. So for example, we know that if someone were to view certain foods as forbidden, so this often in my experience could be more of the dessert or higher calorie foods, chips, fries, things like that. Having this idea that certain foods are forbidden makes you often want it more because you have this restrictive view of it. So you end up craving it more. So some studies have found that when they compare people who restrict themselves calorie-wise compared to people who do not restrict themselves calorie-wise, the restrictors, when told that they will be presented with a forbidden food, end up consuming more of the food compared to someone who doesn't view a food as forbidden. They tend to eat till they're satisfied. So specifically in this study, so restrained eaters and non-restrained eaters were presented with a preload or a pre-meal snack of equivalent caloric value, and it was a milkshake in this case. And then if they told these individuals that the preload food or the milkshake was forbidden, regardless of calorie content, the unrestrained eaters responded to the calorie content, but the restrained eaters tended to increase their intake, even when they just anticipating having to eat some of the forbidden food again. There is also an effect called the what the hell effect, and this is referring to if you put yourself on a diet, maybe there are certain foods or food groups that you tell yourself that you have to avoid. Maybe you're really missing those foods, you're craving it, you end up having some, and then you think to yourself, I already ruined my diet, so why not just continue eating it? And this can lead to overeating. There's also another psychological phenomenon called Last Supper mentality. So this is referring to people who are planning to start a diet. For example, if someone is about to start their diet on Monday and there are certain foods that they tell themselves that they can't eat, guess what they're eating Sunday night? All of those foods, right? And this can also lead to overconsumption and restriction. There are also several social cultural factors that affect how we eat. So for example, social norms and peer influence. So maybe in order to fit into certain social groups or how we were raised, what was a proper portion size or amount to eat around people or groups can influence how we eat. And then also gender roles and expectations. So for example, maybe being expected or seen to need a lot of muscle mass or look thin can also influence how we eat. Food availability and accessibility depends on what we're surrounded with food-wise and what we have access to. That can influence what we eat. And also, we also have areas where there isn't a lot of perhaps more whole food options, fresh fruits and vegetables that can predispose certain groups to choosing what is around them. And that might be the fast food, really quick foods like that. And then lastly, advertising and media. So TV ads, we know can prime us to consume more. So think about the advertisements of a juicy burger or close-up shots of the fries and the sounds, the crispiness. Definitely makes us hungry. So there are certainly several other factors that I did not touch upon, but you can think about if any of them maybe influence how you eat. So what can we do if we have an eating habit that we are trying to resolve or maybe have less power? So I'm going to review a couple concepts, not all, of from intuitive eating, which is an approach developed by two dietitians, Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch. And this emphasizes listening to your body's hunger and fullness cues, respecting your cravings, and then eating in a more loose fashion. So not following a strict diet. It promotes mindful eating, body acceptance, and honoring your unique nutritional needs while focusing on overall well-being, and promotes a healthy relationship with food and body image. This is a well-studied method. It's been found to help decrease instances of emotional eating. It will help with sustainable weight management or weight loss, and it can also improve blood cholesterol, pressure, and blood sugars. So we'll cover three of these strategies. So the first one is awareness and attunement to eating habits. Second one is honoring your hunger. And then third is learning to cope without food. So awareness and attunement. So awareness and attunement to eating habits involves being highly aware and connected to your eating behaviors, preferences, and needs. So being in tune with your body, understanding when you're hungry, when you're full, what cues tell you that, and then with that information, making conscious, mindful choices about food consumption. So approaching it with curiosity. So one example I will give to practice is thinking about the word overeating. So what does overeating mean to you? Because everyone has a very different definition. Does it fit one of these definitions? So it could be eating more than physically desired or needed. Maybe you're feeling physically full, stomach or abdomen is stretching or a little bit uncomfortable. Or does overeating mean that you're violating personal norms? So this would be if you ate more than what you told yourself you are allowed to eat or what you should eat, even though it could be seen subjectively by other people as not a lot of food. Or are you violating social norms? So this is if you ate more than what is considered socially acceptable. So think about growing up with teachings around dining etiquette, what would be a appropriate portion size or guidelines surrounding eating. Or maybe you have another definition, but it's interesting just to start asking yourself questions and where these thoughts around food come from. And next, I want you to think about what foods do you associate with overeating and why? And what do you feel, or do you attach a particular connotation with this food? Do you see it as forbidden, something that is restricting, something that makes you feel that you have no self-control? And does it result in guilt or shame feelings? And is it possible to view foods more neutrally? So the next step is honoring your hunger. So here we have a hunger scale from 1 to 10. So 1 being you're so starved, you feel really weak, about to pass out. 10 being you're stuffed to the point of feeling sick. Where we want to be after eating is a 5 or 6. So you're satiated, maybe you're not feeling either hunger or fullness. or you're mildly full with no discomfort. So I want you to think about the last time you were at a 1 or 2. So very, very hungry. Maybe you had a long day or it was really busy. You didn't have time to eat and had to skip meals. What kind of foods did you want? And more often than not, like when I ask this question to my clients, the responses I receive are things such as desserts or fast foods, things like that. And actually, there's a biological reason for this and why we crave those things. And it's because when we are in starvation mode or our body really needs energy, we want things that are quickly satisfying and provide us energy right away. So usually this is like very calorie dense foods, be higher carbohydrate foods because glucose is our main source of energy. They might be higher fat as well. We might also start demonstrating behaviors where we eat really quickly, unable to really tell when we're full. And I want you to think about, is this answer similar to the food you associate with overeating when we practiced on the previous slide? And next practice, think about, have you ever tried to ignore your hunger when you were at a 4 or below? What happens? So this is something we might do pretty often, whether self-inflicted or maybe if we just didn't have time. It's interesting because I want you to compare and contrast with how you view your other biological functions and if you ever ignore them. So, for example, I often hear if you ignore your hunger, and I ask about what the reasoning is behind that. There might be certain food rules that you tell yourself, such as, I ate 2 hours ago, so I'm not actually hungry. I'm not going to eat until a few more hours later. And now I want you to think about if you applied that same type of thinking to going to the bathroom, for example. So when your bladder fills with urine, you feel the sensation, feels uncomfortable, signals you that you have to go. And if you were to apply the same type of thinking with hunger to going to the bathroom, that would sound like, okay, I have the urge to go to the bathroom, but I just went 2 hours ago, so it's not time yet. I'm not going to go until several hours later. Typically, we go right away, right? Unless we can't, like, need to find a bathroom or something like that. But it's interesting that hunger, it is a biological mechanism and function and something that is innate to us, but it gets disrupted based on circumstances or rules that we tell ourselves. And then the next question is, have you ever been at a 5 or above and found yourself eating something? So is it subconscious? Maybe identify if there is a triggering event. So for example, you pass by the bakery on your walking route and always get a pastry, even if you're not hungry. Are there any associated activities with it, such as you find yourself snacking while watching TV? And as these associations or triggering events result in the eating when at a 5 or above, over time, it can become a habit. And then we end up doing these habits maybe not as consciously. So then it can be difficult to change. So starting to learn and maybe be more conscious with your efforts with eating and habits, we can utilize a strategy. So learning to cope with items other than food. So if you did want food at 5 or above, first ask yourself, is it actually a physical hunger? For example, think about when you're hungry, maybe you feel your stomach growling, maybe you feel very tired, a little irritated, and compare that to how you're feeling at a 5 or above. If it's not physical, ask yourself, is it emotional hunger? So maybe think about, what am I feeling right now? What do I need? and then approach with curiosity and not judgment. So maybe you're feeling bored or tired or anxious or stressed. And then while food can definitely be helpful for that, if your goal is to be a little bit more mindful about eating, first acknowledge that emotional eating is normal and it's okay to eat based on certain emotions. And also think about ways to expand your repertoire of self-soothing techniques and work on your goal of getting more in tune with your hunger and satiety. So that could be maybe taking a few mindful breaths, maybe call a friend, listen to your favorite song, or go on a walk, or whatever is accessible to you at that time. I find that usually with busy clients, just focusing on the breathing, even if it's for 2 rounds of breaths, can be a good start just to calm things down. So in conclusion, we talked about different factors that influence our eating behaviors, learned that ignoring biological hunger can lead to some consequences such as overeating, feeling bad about yourself, not feeling in control. Talked about some strategies to improve your relationship with food, and overall just bringing awareness to why something is, or if there's anything associated with a particular behavior, and approaching it with curiosity before being able to address it. So I hope with this presentation, think it gets you thinking about the factors that play into your own eating behaviors. And if you notice that you recognize that you fall into certain thinking patterns that make you feel not so great about yourself, would you want to try addressing these?
Thanks so much.
And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. So we are open to answering some of the questions today, and I have one that came up in the chat, and this is from Nancy. The question that she comments on making, she tends to eat while preparing meals, and then when the meal is ready, she's already full, yet she still eats the meal anyway. So she's wondering on any tips on how to stop this behavior.
Mm. And it sounds like the pre-meal eating isn't because you're hungry. It's just a habit that you notice that you're doing. Okay, yeah, I think definitely understandable. You're preparing food, the food's right in front of you. I personally, if something's in front of me, it's very enticing. It's like priming me to eat it. So I would say I think the first step is just what you did already, which is recognizing that this is a habit, recognizing that you're not hungry. I would recommend maybe trying out the hunger scale if you haven't already. You know you're not hungry, but can you take that a step further and put a number on it on the scale? And then also that can encourage you to just pause before reaching for food and lengthen that time between the trigger and the consequence, which is grabbing the food. And it might not stop you from eating right away, but it just introduces some pause. So you learn to kind of just pause, maybe approach it with curiosity, like, I noticed that I want to grab food again, but I'm not actually that hungry. Is there something I can do instead while I'm cooking? Or identify if there is a certain emotional need that's not being met or feeling stressed or something. Maybe like playing music while cooking could be a way. And yeah, so I would say that could be a start to the behavior change.
Thanks, Catherine. And I think another one is, I think the other one is from Nancy and is more of a comment, I think, about buying, um, I think, supersized kind of packages or large quantity of food. And so not wanting to waste when the packages are like bigger size. So that's why she doesn't shop there. So that's more of a comment. Let me see. And then there's one last question for you, Catherine. There's a question about type 2 diabetes along with having some GI conditions, where you would eat this and it would be good for diabetes, but not good for GI condition or vice versa. So it can be pretty stressful. From this is the comment that's being made. So you can easily choose wrong food or stress eat and overeat. So how do you break the cycle? I guess thinking about diabetes, blood sugar management, and maybe different GI conditions. I think this is like a big a big question there.
Yeah, for sure. And you're definitely not alone with this because people often have several different conditions and the food recommendations often are contradicting. So first, I would say if you can, working with getting connected to a dietitian who is able to assess you the whole picture and then come up with some recommendations based on that. And then also the second part was it sounds like it is very stressful, maybe trying to keep all the pieces aligned. And also looks like you might view certain foods as it's wrong or it's wrong for this condition. I'm sure also it might make you feel not so great too for certain GI conditions leading to stress eating and overeating. So breaking the cycle, I would say first, like if you are able to work with a dietitian and have a good outline in terms of which foods are beneficial for both, and it might not just be the foods because it's also how we eat and our eating patterns too, right? So it might be that you choose something that is lower fiber, which is appropriate for your GI condition, but also pairing it with some sort of protein to help manage your blood sugars by slowing down the release of glucose from the carbohydrate into your bloodstream. And then let's see what else. Yeah, some other ones I've gotten are if you have gastroparesis, so your stomach emptying is a little slower, the recommendations are typically having very low fiber, very low fat, small frequent meals. And then with diabetes, some of the general recommendations are having a lot of fiber, which helps regulate blood sugar. And so thinking about definitely there are some ways to help manage that. There are some lower fiber vegetables that could be chosen. And then again, pairing things with protein and also easier said than done, but not being too so hard on yourself. It's very complicated and your experiences are valid. And I think definitely seeking out help can be helpful.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I think this is all the questions that we have for today. So this we recorded this session today, and it will be available later after it has been uploaded to the website. Okay.
Everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Have a good one.